Scott, I have your family's names, and I'm not afraid to do something bad with them. Like, give them to a hacker on a hacking forum on the deep web. I'd recommend you stop your censorship spree, Scott. This person was angry at Scott for making FNAF 3 and 4. That was it. Just making FNAF 3 and 4. Shortly after I released my video on the pair, one of the team members who had absolutely nothing to do with the controversy received a message from someone threatening to come to their house and beat them up in real life. When Scott wrote the first FNAF book, fans started to look into his co-author, Kira Breed Risley. When they were unable to find any of Kira's social media pages, they decided that she simply didn't exist and that there must be some sort of conspiracy going on. Scott finally cleared things up, explaining that Kira is a professional writer. However, before I published the book, I advised her to make sure that all of her social media accounts were set to private because there would be weirdos and creeps who would stalk her on the internet. I think it was good advice. Sometimes people say really stupid things, completely unprovoked and with virtually nothing to gain from them. Believe me, I would know. Unfortunately, the insane way the FNAF community responds to controversies is unacceptable, and it needs to stop. I should specify that it's not the entire FNAF community, it's a small vocal minority of people who seem to believe that they're the arbiters of righteousness or something like that. So basically, Twitter users. It's no secret that FNAF Twitter can be a really toxic place. Most of you are probably already aware of the now infamous donations that led to series creator Scott Cawthon retiring and withdrawing from the series. I was not happy when I heard about Scott's donations, but surely we can all recognize that the way the community responded was totally out of line. It's never okay to harass people or send them and their families death threats, ever. In the wake of my own video covering the pair controversies, naturally, Junior's developer Ramanov and the others directly involved started to receive threats and messages telling them to end their own lives and stuff like that. Obviously, the people involved in the pair said some pretty offensive things and are accused of doing some pretty lame stuff. It still doesn't justify that kind of behavior, though. For some reason, this vocal segment of the FNAF community on Twitter seems to believe that this behavior is acceptable, that people somehow deserve to be harassed or even threatened over an opinion they had or even a stupid thing they did. They believe that they're entitled to continually punish someone over and over again for a mistake. To FNAF Twitter, that's justice apparently. If you do anything that upsets the mob, then you're no longer allowed to participate in the series whatsoever. God forbid you do, they'll harass you, mock you, torment you, and tell you to end your life. And they'll feel justified in doing so. If you cross FNAF Twitter, then I'm sorry, but you deserve to die. But they burn, motherfucker, you deserve to die. I wish I could point to a moment where the community became so insane, but I'm starting to think that things have always been this way. When FNAF 4 came out and MatPat made the Dream Theory, a lot of people were disappointed and felt like it was a cop-out. However, some people took things way too far and harassed Scott over it. He received threats of violence from people over Dream Theory. When FNAF first came out, Scott made himself incredibly available to the community, far more so than most developers do. Someone once posted on the FNAF forums about petitioning Scott for something, and Scott himself replied with, no, petitions are for big companies. With me, you can just be like, hey, Scott. Good thing the FNAF community would never fuck that up or anything. Scott frequently took feedback from fans, he interacted with people, and he was just overall a really cool, engaged indie developer. Everyone knew that Scott was reading Reddit and watching FNAF YouTube, and getting him to comment on your content was like always a big badge of honor. Unfortunately, as the series exploded, some began to take advantage of just how accessible Scott was. People would attack him on the Steam forums, calling him a sellout or lazy. When he deleted these insane, threatening, profanity-laden posts, he'd be accused of censorship. Haters don't make me mad. I get more upset when people troll the forums using hate instead of criticism. If you want to criticize the game, that's fine. But if you can't do it without making fun of autism, cancer, or the fanbase in general, then you'll get banned. Be respectful on the forums, that's all I ask. The same thing happened again when FNAF World came out to a mediocre reception. Even after Scott vastly improved the game and re-released it for free, people still complained and called him a sellout. When the first FNAF merchandise launched, some FNAF fans were very upset with the designs. One infamous post described the merch as disgusting, and it surmised that there was no way Scott had approved these designs. It turned out Scott had seen the merch though, and he had approved it, and he was proud of it. He was really disappointed by the community's incredibly visceral reaction to what amounted to literal children's toys. Seriously, with the levels of outrage present here, you'd think that Scott killed people or something. This is the kind of behavior that doesn't reassure a creator that close interactions with fans are a good thing, and like, can you blame him? Look at where we are now. For some reason, the FNAF community in particular has always been especially entitled and insane when it comes to controversy. When Baddington first started releasing his FNAF videos, everyone loved him and they quickly became a popular creator, but when he went to release the now infamous joke about Martin Walls passing away, people went crazy. Baddington had taken down the tweet, he'd apologized. Martin Walls himself was unsurprisingly silent throughout most of the actual drama, yet people took it upon themselves to relentlessly attack Baddington. It was a mistake, you know? It's one thing to criticize someone and make them aware of something they did that you felt was wrong, but it's another thing entirely to continue to do so after the person has already acknowledged your criticisms and apologized for them. At that point, you're no longer providing meaningful feedback, you're just trying to punish someone, and you have no right to do that. When my interview with Aftonbuilt's developer came out, people started giving them shit for having offered to speak with me at all. They felt that for some reason he wasn't entitled to share the truth of his experience, and they made that very clear to him, over and over again. People started criticizing him for having broken his NDA with Scott, which again, they had no right to do. Any agreements were between the developer and Scott. Random Twitter users have no right to accuse this developer of having broken a contract that they've never seen. Even worse, I suspect that this criticism was made in the hopes that it would hurt the developer's chances to get work in the future. Violating an NDA doesn't usually result in getting sued, but it does hurt your credibility and it can cause you to miss out on opportunities in the future. I think these Twitter users emphasize that part explicitly to try and punish this dev as much as possible, which is just like fucked up. Like, who the fuck are you? You're not Scott. You don't own FNAF. You don't gain anything from this other than the vindictive pleasure of seeing someone you don't like suffer. It's like this vocal portion of the FNAF community doesn't know how to express their displeasure with anything other than by cyberbullying people, harassing them, and threatening them. The pair situation was obviously bad, but nothing ever warrants harassing someone, let alone threatening them or encouraging them to end their own lives. Nothing. There's virtually nothing to gain from treating people like that, and honestly, how would you feel if you encouraged someone to do something that drastic and they actually went and did it? You'd probably feel like shit, and rightfully so. There's this group of FNAF fans who feel that they're entitled to do everything in their power to make someone's life miserable should they cross them. It almost reminds me of the way Scientologists consider critics and ex-members to be fair game and actively encourages their harassment. Once someone is declared fair game by this segment of the FNAF community, all bets are off. Any and all harassment is acceptable and in fact encouraged. If someone crosses this imaginary line, they're now pure evil and thus should be harassed off the internet and, ideally, harassed out of existence. It's insane. There are ways to express your displeasure with people, but this isn't it. If anything, it draws attention away from whatever it is you're trying to hold this person accountable for in the first place. The moment you start threatening or harassing someone, you simply drag yourself down to the lowest level possible, and you lose all credibility. The developers who participated in the pair chat room said a lot of pretty reprehensible things that upset a lot of people, and no one was wrong to criticize them over that. However, even they didn't deserve the harassment and threats that they received. Using slurs or allegedly threatening to leak people's fan games is obviously a really lame thing to do, and it warrants serious criticism, but it doesn't justify harassment. It doesn't make it right, no matter how offended you are by someone and no matter how long their list of misdeeds are. I assure you, telling that person to end their own lives or continually and relentlessly mocking them, that makes you just as bad as them, if not worse. The FNAF community is not a tribe that votes people off the island once a week. If you're unhappy with something someone did or said, you should express that. The best case scenario, you might open up a dialogue with that person and come to a better understanding. Even if you don't, you can just block each other and agree to go your separate ways. What you can't do is threaten to beat people up or harass people. It's not how society works, and if you do that in real life, there's going to be serious consequences. If FNAF Twitter is to be believed, everyone is either a shit person or they're a shit person who hasn't yet revealed how shitty they are. In reality, people aren't perfect and things aren't so black and white. People make mistakes and we've all said and done things that we regret. If someone truly does something that you feel is unforgivable, fine. You can let them know, block them, and move on with your life. Nothing gives you the right to harass people though, and if you find yourself mocking someone over something that they've already apologized for, you might be the shitty person here. Furthermore, complaining never achieves anything anyway. In Scott's own words, it's really not a big deal. There will always be people who waste away their lives, complaining and whining, but it will continue to accomplish the same thing it always accomplished. Nothing.